Gents, good morning. Casual Gaming Dad here, and it's story time. So get your popcorn, get your favorite beverage, your favorite snack, whatever it may be. I want to tell you a little something about my life and how gaming came into it, and how it's still here, and how it'll likely always be here for me. Uh, Bear with me. I don't have a script or anything and whatnot, but it's just something that I felt like doing, and a story I felt like telling. And I'm certain there are many those out there that can relate to what gaming really means to you, And I felt like I really wanted to put my story out there. So it started at the ripe age of 5. uh, Nintendo was a just starting to become a thing, right? I got a Nintendo Entertainment System at 5 with Super Mario Brothers. It was the first video game I played, and I know that I got Mario Brothers at 5, and I know that I finished it at 5. So I saved the princess. I remember my dad took a little. I was really excited, so he had a little Polaroid camera back at that time, and took a picture of it. I unfortunately do not have that Polaroid. If I did, it'd probably be somewhere back there, laminated and framed in a picture frame to protect it. That would have probably been something very special, but it didn't survive the test of time. Likely because, my parents were kind of okay with me gaming when I was young. Not so much when I got older. And, you know, in their defense, they come from a different world, different timeline, and a different place. And gaming was still not that popular. It was just barely starting to pick up. So it wasn't that widely accepted for a while. As a matter of fact, I can tell you exactly when my family finally accepted the fact that I'm a gamer. I was 38. It was my 38th birthday. I'm level 40 right now. So just a couple of years ago. So most of my life, I just wasn't the case. But from there, I continued to get games here and there. Not usually buying. Blockbuster was still a thing back then, so we would rent games on weekends. I remember how exciting it was for me. We'd rent them on Fridays, and oftentimes my brother and I would end up waking up early on Saturday mornings before my mother got up, mind you, and we'd go and we were playing. Yes, you only had a couple of days. That's what you had when you rented, right? Only had a couple of days to play, and many games that I played and finished were games that were rented. Sometimes I'd rent it more than once, but I even remember finishing the infamous Battletoads for Nintendo, and I remember thinking it was pretty tough at the time, but back then, that's really all we had. Was a lot of the games back then, especially Nintendo, were hard games. So fast forward, decades later, and my son for some reason brings that game up, and I said, "Oh yeah, I finished that game," and I just very casually told him. He was, "Wait, what?" He was dumbfounded. Like he's like, "That's just one of the hardest games like ever made." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know. We were made of something different back then, or more than likely it was just because that's what we had, so we just adapted, and we were able to finish it." So, for example, I finished Super Mario Brothers when I was 5, and my nephew, who's about half my age, he finished Super Mario Galaxy when he was 5. And I look at Galaxy and I think, wow, I mean, that's you would think is a harder game. I don't really know by today's standards if that's a harder game, but I mean, it's still impressive nonetheless. So I had a Nintendo, At a certain point, I had a Game Boy. And then when the Super Nintendo came out, not right away when it came out, but when it did and it started to become more popular and I really wanted one, uh, my parents didn't want me to have it really, but we made a deal. I, I would get rid of my Nintendo and Game Boy in exchange for that. So we went to a swap meet, local swap meet, and we sold everything and it took that money. And, not necessarily a bad lesson, really, right? About, you know, sometimes that's just how it is in life. You don't always have the finances, Unlike today, that's a little bit different, I mean, money's not really a barrier for someone of my age, who's worked for many, many years and who has savings and whatnot. At least for gaming, I should say. I should clarify. So I got the Super Nintendo, and I remember I got the one with the package. Came with Link to the Past. So this was, again, not on release, right? And I bought Super Metroid 2, one of my favorite games, ever. And really, really loved that game a lot. And I had a Super Nintendo for a bit. At one point, we had a Sega Genesis as well. I fell in love with Sonic. I loved his character. I mean, I can't say the games were the best. I mean, they were definitely fun, and I enjoyed them a lot as a kid. But the character always stuck with me. So when the Sonic movies came out, I was more than happy to take my son to see them, and we enjoyed them both. We really did. It's just Sonic is just a fun, cool character. I mean. Are the movies objectively amazing? No, not really. But fun nonetheless. It wasn't until I was about 12 that I got my first, I'd say, what was my first decently powerful PC. Back in the day, this was a Gateway 2000. It was pretty expensive. It was at least a couple grand, You guys ready for this? It was a 66 megahertz. Megahertz, not gigahertz, okay? Obviously, we don't have anything that powerful today, but megahertz processor. Okay, so, yeah, I got something in my eye. It keeps bothering me. 66 megahertz. I started experimenting with some games on PC. I remember I had this battle chess game where the characters where you had chess pieces and you would move them, and then they would turn into creatures or people as they did moves, and when they took them out. So the rook would turn into this rock golem, and it would walk over and then crush, enemy and stuff. I remember liking that game a lot. I also remember some older games, like a Star Wars kind of first-person shooter. You were in an X-Wing or a TIE fighter. And I had a little joystick like this to play with, It wasn't until I was 17 that I got my first actual gaming PC. And at this time is when Half-Life from Valve was released around that time. And it was very popular, and I had a lot of friends and family members that were into it. So that's what we started playing. And for a while, it was primarily that. It was that and, well, the deathmatch version of Half-Life, The Half-Life today that people play is Counter-Strike, I have a lot to tell you about that game as well, because I was there when it was first in beta. We would have 3 to 4 people per game. And there was only one map. There was just Siege. And back then it was so old that you could literally, kind of like in Half-Life, if you ever played the game, you could have a keybind where you could drop any given weapon on the floor, and it was like this little pack, and pick up another one. Well, in Counter-Strike, that was also the case. We still have those packs. So I remember what we used to do is we'd go and we'd take out the opposing team, we'd pick up their weapons, And then what we'd do is we'd take them back to our base when he respawned, and then we'd hide them. So we'd drop them in like little corners here and there, so that if we died, we could always come back and didn't have to buy weapons. You know, you could just go in and just pick up the packs. So that's, of course, they changed that. You know, at a certain point, I don't remember exactly when, but they changed that, so you couldn't do that anymore. But yeah, so some of my notable, I'm not going to go through everything, obviously, but some of my notable games that I played. Actually, you know, before I get into that, I want to just talk a little bit about why gaming stuck with me and why it's such an important piece of my life, you know. I had a couple of good friends growing up. Okay, I had one in particular since kindergarten, still friends to this day. I had some others that were family that came and went because they moved, you know, and just weren't around that much. And I always remember really enjoying the experience that gaming gave us. And what's I feel stands about gaming, and one of the reasons likely it's why it's so popular today, is just the way that, you know, our minds, our brains interact with the experience. It's much more engaging compared to other forms of entertainment, such as watching a show or a movie, you know, because it involves you in some way, you know. You have the controller in your hand or the device in your hand, and you know you're playing a role in what's happening, and it's very, very exciting. And I've always found it very exciting and engaging for that reason. Oftentimes, even to this day, I'll find myself doing other activities out with family, and if I'm feeling, I guess, bored or not stimulated, then my mind wanders to, ooh, and I wish I could be playing this game or doing this right now. And it's more often than not, it's video game related. It's just where my brain just tends to gravitate towards after I mean, couldn't tell you how many hours of gaming I've done in my life at this point. When I was a teenager and a young adult, instead of other activities that people would be doing, my friends and I would get together and play games. And what had started to become more popular at the time were these LAN centers. So you would go there, and they still exist today. They're just not as common. And to be frank, I feel a struggling business model just because of how much money and you need upfront to get it going. And then, especially with PCs, you really have to replace them every 5-ish years. Video cards and things just start to break. They just start to not function, not keep up with, current games and whatnot. So it's a pretty short turnaround. If it was more like 10 years or so, then it'd probably be more doable. But so we would go to these LAN centers and we would pay per hour to play on PCs. And we even made friends with the owners of some of these gaming centers, and we would get a discounted price because we'd be there for so many hours. We'd go on weekends. I'd go on a Saturday and I'd be there for 8 to 10 hours. Yeah, that's what we did. I'd be sitting next to my friend playing a game online with said friend. And it wasn't just one of us. There were several of us. Even I had family, cousins, and whatnot did the same thing. And that was, for many of us, that was our outing. That's what we did. I remember how much my mother hated that I did that. And I think back, I'm like, would you have rather me been going out drinking alcohol, going to clubs, and, other things, like I never did drugs at all my life, and I tried alcohol for a little bit, I drink maybe once or twice a year. I don't drink, so it's, I always thought it just didn't make sense to me, like, the complaining. But anyways, so that's what we did. That's what we did. We would go game, a certain point, we take a break, go get some junk food at our local fast food places. We loved Mexican food too because we were in San Diego, Southern California. So that's what we did, and I did that all the way until my mid-20s. And some of those notable games were Half-Life, Counter-Strike for some time. Warcraft 3 was a pretty popular online game, and Diablo 2 was another one. Diablo 2 came before that, of course. Actually, Diablo 2 came out around the time that I met my now wife. Back then, just a co-worker. We didn't, that happened a few years down the road, but that's when we met, And yeah, I think I'm going to make a separate video talking about the Diablo series specifically, because I think that one has a real special place for me. I didn't play Diablo 1 until later, but and then Diablo 3, and now 4 is coming, so I'll talk about that another time. But gaming has been this consistent thing for me in my life, and past my mid-20s, I went to graduate school, and then I got married, and I've always had a gaming PC since then. There's only been relatively small blocks of time where I didn't have one. It was never more than 6 months to a year, and it happened twice only. And it was because of circumstance, where I either had to wait because of money or because I was waiting for the next video card or an update to come out first before I made a big purchase. So it definitely wasn't more than 6 months. Yeah, it definitely wasn't. But I always had a gaming PC, and I had, like I said, I went through quite a few consoles when I was growing up. And present day, I have a very nice gaming PC that I bought last year. I have a PlayStation 5. I have a Nintendo Switch, right? Switch mainly for Pokemon related stuff. Played some other games on there, but it's mainly for that. And I do most of my gaming on my PC, but I do have quite a few games that I've played on the PlayStation, and I have to say that there's been some good ones in that era. It's been this constant presence in my life, and it's kind of my comfort zone that I can go to de-stress, to escape, right? I think some people look at that and might interpret that negatively, but it's really not. For me, I feel there were times in my life where, for whatever reason, because of what I was dealing with personally or professionally, I didn't find myself motivated to play games. And I can tell you that really affected me, and it led me to feeling oftentimes depressed and down, less productive. So in a lot of ways, gaming, it saved my life. It really kept me going, and it gave me something to really look forward to and to enjoy, and it's something that I enjoy doing every single day. There are times where I simply can't in that day, but if I have the time, if it's available to me, most days I will play something. And I can't imagine my life otherwise. I can't. It's just such an enjoyable experience to have. And I really like being immersed in a world, that's different from ours. And I enjoy the writing of developers, and the story, and gameplay is very important as well. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but sometimes you're in the mood for certain types of games, and other times not. So, for example, open world games, I've played many of them, and while it's not my favorite type of game, they're often very well made, and they have great story and oftentimes great gameplay, you know. It's very rare that a game ticks all of those boxes. It's very rare. You know, even some of my favorite games, like, you know, ARPGs like Diablo, they're not going to have the best story in the world. It's not going to be the most engaging, or it's not going to have some immense plot twist that's going to catch you off guard. It's not typically going to have that, you know. We have some pretty interesting lore to go with in those types of games, but those games are more about other things, you know, which, like I said, I'll talk more about in another video. But yeah, that's kind of my very brief summary of, you know, gaming being a part of my life and how it's been there for decades now, and how I've come to discover that even as an adult, how important it is, you know. And, you know, other people noticed it too when I didn't game. My wife noticed, and she noticed that I was more stressed and more disengaged, and as I reflected and realized, a bit depressed at times, you know. So if you feel that way about your life sometimes, you're not alone. And I know that there are many of us like that, and, you know, gaming's become really popular. And while that's both exciting for a number of reasons, it's also a bit concerning, simply because, you know, unfortunately, the rich and the powerful, they see, you know, the potential for making money in this industry, and they've dug their claws into it, and it's hurting the gaming industry. But, you know, I don't know if I want to dive really into that in this video. I think this is more just about me personally and my gaming experience, and how it's helped shape me and change me. And, you know, all I can tell you is that I'm a gamer for life, and I see myself doing this well into my adult years here. I'm about halfway through my life. I can't say for sure. Just thinking about averages, right? And I've enjoyed quite a bit, and I'm hoping to enjoy more. And I share that with my children, and they enjoy it as well. And I'm glad they do, because it's something we can connect with and bond with, you know. And I introduced my son to gaming, which, yeah, he was hook, line, and sinker, like, right away. He was really into it right away. But yeah, I'd love to hear from all of you about how gaming has impacted your life and how you feel about it. So sound off in the comments. You know, let me know. Let me know what are some special memories for you with gaming, and, you know, I'll try to respond, of course. But nonetheless, thanks for watching. If you found this enjoyable, leave a like. You know, consider subscribing if you want. I'm a small creator. I'm not making money on this types of content at all at this point in my life. It's just not a priority for me to do that. But I do like to do it from time to time, and I think it's fun. And I like to engage with the gaming community. And, you know, Casual Gaming Dad signing out. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.